Chapter 7 Memories and Visions. Maercella, Benilde. I opened the drawer and looked for the vial of green liquid I had prepared the other day. It was where I placed it, covered by more than a dozen shawls, enough for no one to come across it. The dreams came to me no more, but before the Akean Wine Festival, I had a nightmare once again. A warning, telling me to prepare for the days to come. My son had become the emperor. The meme did not lie. Had I not left Wind behind, he would not have become who he is now. But I am angry at myself because now that everything seems to settle according to the fate the gods had woven for my son, this warning comes to me in timing. It was unclear, as in the olden days, telling me to go to my son. But how could I go to him? He hates me. No, hate is such a weak word to describe how he feels towards me. I would not want to see my son, and yet, as a mother, I had always longed to at least hear his voice. Even if I had not talked to him or even seen him, his face always rested at the back of my mind, an illusion of a boy who once needed his mother. The dream that came to me was months before the last Akean Wine Festival, and it had warned me that if I did not go to see my son, he would do something that would compromise himself as emperor. What was I supposed to do? If an emperor were to do something outrageous, was it not forgivable? After all, he is emperor. So, I ignored what the dream foretold me. I would not face him where I know I cannot win. I only want his love back, and yet he would never bestow that upon me. So curse me for letting that day run amok. For allowing the emperor to make a mistake that would forever be remembered by all of Akean. If I had gone to him, would the events have changed? Would that have stopped him from ordering that boy to die? I did not understand how he could be so frustrated with just a boy. Did my son see the young one as a threat? And yet, when I met the boy, there was nothing extraordinary about him. Even I could have easily planted a dagger onto his chest at that time, but why would I do such a thing? I am a mother, too, and I cannot make another mother suffer the pain of losing a son. Besides, the boy was not whom I was looking for. And all this brought me back to my current task. Lately, the dreams did not bother me anymore. I hated it when I needed them to visit me but would not. So tonight, I would force the dreams to come to me. I twisted the vial's cork and stared at the greenish liquid inside it for a few moments. This would bring me back to the dream world, and I would know what needed to be done. I pressed the vial against my lips, swallowing the thick liquid in it. This time, I did not fall on the floor. I knew how swiftly the concoction would take effect, so before drinking it, I lay on the bed. The warnings may be horrible, but at least I would be comfortable on my bed. I was back inside a castle. The ceilings were higher than what we had in our own palace back in Mayo. Flying buttresses decorated every column. Paintings of all sorts covered the walls that stretched out along the palace corridors. I had seen this place before, back when I was still a little girl, and my father had me blessed by the emperor himself. I was in the Grand Canellan Palace? But what am I doing here? The halls were quiet, and the palace seemed to be vacated. I was tiptoeing in silence and afraid to be seen when somebody opened a door and dashed across the hall from in front of me. A sword flashed as the person passed. Whoever that was immediately lost inside another room. I decided that I had to be quick to catch the person and sprinted lightly towards the room the swordsman entered. When I reached the door, I pushed it open. As expected, the swordsman was there waiting for me. He jumped and swung the sword in front of me. I froze, afraid that I had died. I gasped, but nothing happened. From the back, I heard a loud thud as someone collapsed to the floor. I turned slowly and saw streaks of silvery hair on a head that was severed from its body. I shivered as my gaze fell upon the face of my son. No! I screamed. I grabbed the head and clutched it against my chest. I kissed his forehead over and over until my lips felt numb. I was still crying when I recognized that I was in the dreaming world. This wasn't real. My son was out there in the real world, alive. And the reason I was here was to find out who his assassin was so that I could prevent him from killing my son. Realizing this, I put down Wind's head, and it vanished along with his body. The blood that stained my dress had gone as well. The only trace of the earlier incident was the wetness grazing my cheeks. I had to find the swordsman. But where? How could I prevent this from happening? I closed my eyes as I ran. I would let the surroundings bring me to where I could find the answers. I was unaware of how long I had been traveling the dreaming world when torrential rain poured, leaving me drenched. The wind was blowing hard, and the trees were swaying wildly as though dancing to pay tribute to the onslaught. I clutched my shawl and tasted the rain rolling down to my upper lip. What could I possibly find here? Will this place give me the answers I seek? Where did the swordsman go? I walked stealthily even though there was no one around. If there was anything I learned from traveling in the dreaming world, it was that one could never be sure of who was watching. To my right, I saw a flash of boots. I ran after it, unafraid of what I would discover. This has always been my purpose, to protect my son, and I would do anything for him. Anything. The swordsman stopped and removed the sword from its scabbard. The sword was raised as though drawing into it some kind of power. But nothing happened. The sword slashed at the air so fast that I could hardly believe there was still a sword. From where I was hunched, I could swear that it was as though there was nothing but air in the hands of the swordsman. How could anyone be such a swordmaster? However, his footwork was a little unstable. He would step forward, then back, then duck and weave about. But however good he was with the sword, he was flimsy on his feet. The practice stopped, and the swordsman threw the sword as though angry. The sword pierced the trunk of a tree, shaking until it finally stopped. Lightning flashed, and at that moment, I caught a glimpse of a red gem encrusted in the sword's hilt. A ruby-gilded sword. But how many swords are there in Akean? It would not be easy to find this person in the waking world. The swordsman turned as though he sensed my presence. His eyes blinked, surprised. Then he vanished right in front of me, and my surroundings instantly changed. It was weird this time. I was on top of a canyon. Or was I? The temperature was so hot that my dress was soaked, not from the rain but rather from my sweat. My cheeks were burning, and so were the soles of my feet. From out of nowhere, Akean citizens of all races came running towards me. "Run!" They shouted in unison. "Run, or else you'll die," the shouting continued. A man carrying his child bumped against me, and I toppled over. But before I could get back on my feet, a woman dragging a goat hit me, and I was felled to the ground. My arms were all bruised, and my body ached all over. My eardrums beat wildly from the noise of the stampede. When the last of the Akeans had passed me, I gathered my strength to stand up. And there, I watched as the biggest volcano in Karasthea spewed lava, lighting the sky as though they were fireworks. I stood frozen and could not even bring myself to run for my life. The boiling lava rolled down the volcano, ravaging everything in its path. It continued and gained speed as it flowed. I yelled helplessly as the smoke engulfed me. The temperature had grown to infernal levels, and I shrieked for my life. I started running away, but there was no way I could escape my fate. Was this it? Was this how I was going to die? Then from above, I saw storm clouds gathering. Lightning split the sky, and I prayed that nature would fight with nature. I could not die yet. Not like this. A woman was walking towards me. She had dark eyes darker than a winter night. But as she walked, the burning embers of the lava reflected in her eyes, and I grew afraid of her. She was gliding towards me like a goddess amidst the volcanic turmoil. I yelled as a burning rock flew and headed straight towards her. As though my shout was a warning, the woman, without looking back, stepped sideways and avoided the blazing rock. Without the woman in front of me, the rock struck me, burning me all over my body. So this was how I would die. And that was when I woke up, deafened by the sound of my screams. I was panting as my body felt numb, and I had to wait several minutes before I was able to move my legs. Horror still coated my heart. I had seen many deaths, but never before was I able to witness mine, and it was terrifying. And in that last moment, as I burned in my dream, I wondered if it was worth it to die for my son. A life for a life. A mother's for a son's. I forced myself to relax and slowly rubbed the corners of my eyes. There was no sense crying over something that had yet to happen. But if there was no one else to mourn me, should I not at least indulge myself and cry? I rolled to my side and grabbed the pillow beside me. My husband was gone. My son was gone. How else could I afford not to break down? When the tears started falling, I prepared myself for a day in bed, swathed with nothing but longing.